Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Gose.
And I'm Jenny Field. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience, beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. Now, I'm kicking us off today with a little challenge, really, because I feel like we live in a world of negativity on LinkedIn. And it's really, for me, and maybe it's for everybody else, but I just feel like there's so many posts now about how bad, specifically internal communication is, and how awful it is working in the role because it's so hard and you're always having to fight for the seat at the table, in quotes, and having to fight for budget and fight for this. And I don't know if it's just that people are using negative stuff to get the clicks and the comments that then create the conversation. But I'm almost at a point of saying, why do people do this job if they hate it so much? Because it just feels like I'm in a pit of negativity. So I'd love it, and I'm going to challenge myself to do this, to do more positive posts on LinkedIn about how great things are or how great something is that's been recently, because it's made me reflect a little bit. And so that's my challenge to you as well, Chuck, to do.
Well,
I mean, you're pretty
Jenny,
positive anyway, let's be honest.
I am a very, contrary to popular beliefs, I am actually a very positive person. I've even gone to the point, Jenny, of trying to structure some of the content and things that I share that if 1 to 2 posts a week should be something around gratitude, and
Yeah.
another 1 to 2 posts a week should be celebrating something that I'm seeing my friends do.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
if you're not celebrating your friends, like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I think there is this pit of despair
Yeah.
that comes a wave. And again, is it that people see that they then get a reaction for it? So then the brain tricks off like, oh, this is what gets people going. And it's not here. What I think is different, it is purely negative. It's not anger. Because I
No.
think there's anger that can actually propel people and push people and get people to change and do things. This is just sort of mired in some glob of woe is us and
Yeah. Yeah.
imposter syndrome and all this stuff that I'm just like, ugh, like
Yeah.
get over
Yeah.
it.
It feels like we're just in a pit of resentment. And I don't enjoy that. Like, I love the job that I do. I've always loved the job that I do. Yes, it's hard. Yes, sometimes it's challenging. Yes, sometimes you're having to fight for budget, but I still love that. I enjoy that. And I think if it really feels that awful, then I don't know why people are doing it. So I'm going to take your framework, and I'd encourage others to do the same, of the, like, 2 things should be gratitude, 2 things should be celebrating people, or however much you choose to post on
Mhm.
there. But I just feel we need to flood it with some element of positivity and uplifting
I think,
stuff.
Jenny, what you should do, double down on the negativity. As you see people post these things, you should reply, I don't know, maybe you should just quit.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to have to start saying, like, why do you still do the job if you hate it so much? Like, and that is, to be fair, a lot of it is consultants and people that are, I think, trying to create the noise. And I just don't think it's helpful or healthy for us to feel like that. So yeah, that was where I was kicking off today. But what have you got for us to talk about on this episode?
Jenny, here's what we've got up for this week. One, Korn Ferry says manager layers are thinning and spans are widening while RTO pressure is rising against employee preference. There's Economist Culture X data shows full-time office can buy agility, but often dents in candor, leadership, support, while flexible models lift the experience if you design for speed. And Spring Health and Forrester finds stress climbing and benefits going underused. We're going to first get into story number 1, which is not something we really talked a lot about, Jenny, in the past. Nestle's CEO was fired. Earlier this month, Nestle, I guess that's the correct one. We say Nestle here in the US. Nestle dismissed CEO Laurent Frex for failing to disclose a romantic relationship with a direct subordinate. Staff complaints through the company's Speak Up channel prompted an initial probe that found no evidence. A second board-overseen investigation concluded he breached Nestle's code of conduct. Nespresso chief Philip Navrati was appointed to replace him, with their CFO outlining the timeline at an investor conference the next day. Jenny, let's compare this to the data company Astronomer's CEO, Andy Byron, resigning after that viral Coldplay clip that everyone saw sparked a board investigation into his relationship with the firm's HR chief, and she soon resigned later. Jay, what I want to talk about is here, given astronomer in July, Nestle now in September, do you think we're at the start of a wave here with more leaders pushed out as whistleblower tools and public scrutiny tighten things, or will this simply drive some executives to hide relationships even more aggressively?
So I chuckled as we got to this point because it reminded me of a post I saw on Instagram the other day that said that the reason everybody wants to return to office is because these men are all having affairs at work and hate their relationships at home. And then we've now got two CEOs, and I don't know about Nestle, and that's an assumption which I shouldn't make, but it just made me laugh that you were like, in July and now in September, and all I can see is that post. I think the whistleblower tools are important. I think it's interesting in the Nestle example that there was an investigation and then another one. I feel like there's more underneath that feels like that's an interesting double sort of investigation. But I wonder if it will also make people just actually go the opposite. So where you've said, do you think it will drive people to hide them? Actually, will it make people come out and be honest about it and then deal with the consequences of that relationship? Because if it's a genuine relationship, then, codes of conduct, I think, are a bit tricky in some of that. Because if you're two consenting adults, meeting at work, which so often happens. There was an example in the press last week of a couple who worked at Aldi, the supermarket, and got married recently, and they met working there. It does happen. So I think you've got to think about what that code of conduct really is and how that has been structured for modern work. But I do think that I would like to think that it would make people come out and be more honest, but maybe I'm being an eternal optimist there.
I think the two supermarket employees is an example. I think when you're the CEO of a global organization, that's a little bit different.
But what if you're
And
single? What if you're single as a CEO? Are you just and you meet someone at work? Like that?
well, one, you disclose that, but if they're subordinate, that's gonna create all kinds of risks for both parties.
Mm,
That's just how it is. That's just how it is. I think what you touched on, and I'm gonna go deeper into this part that a whistleblower reported it. An investigation took place, which I'm wondering, did he know about this investigation or not? Let's say he did and did not come clean
mm,
at that point in time, that then somehow then that triggered a board investigation, which
yeah.
then either they found something or he came clean. This guy was also at this company for a long time. This wasn't just somebody that parachuted in and is now leaving. Rarely do things just happen once. So this is probably some sort of repeated behavior, I'm guessing. So I do wonder, like, who's next? Like,
Mm,
have these things been going on and are because of astronomer, because of now Nestle, are employees gonna be like, is it now that's got the office tea?
yeah.
Is this now the thing? And I don't think people are gonna put up with it, plain and simple. I think that we know it's inappropriate. We know it's not right. I'm not saying that every CEO needs to be single their entire life. Obviously, you can meet people. You just can't have a romantic relationship with subordinate and hide it. Because if
Mm,
they had come out with it, the company would have said, "Hey, this isn't appropriate. One of you has to go." Like
yeah.
that's those are the conversations that happen. They clearly hit it, perhaps even hit it twice.
Yeah. It's the
And
hiding, isn't it?
here we are.
It's almost it's not the situation, it's the hiding of it. I think that's always the bit that you come unstuck over, because if you had been honest, to your point, you're either going to have the conversation that someone needs to go, or actually it's so far removed, or it's not, and it whatever the reasons might be, wherever those layers are, whether it's a CEO or someone else, there might be ways that that can work, but that needs to be discussed openly without it feeling like you're sneaking off into the lift for a quick snog before you go to the next meeting. Do you
Well,
snog?
and
I don't know.
again, if this let's just role play it out like this. The whistleblower complaint came in. Let's assume it was handled by legal or HR.
Yeah.
They go to the CEO and is like, "Hey, we've got this report. Is this true?" And he's like, "No." And they're like, Are you sure?" "No, nothing to it. Cool. We're good." I wonder what happened then. Was there more of these? And then
Yeah.
to bring a board into something like this, there's quite a bit there. I know nothing salacious about this. From what I know, Coldplay was not involved in any way, shape, or form. There is no video of this, but I wonder how much more of this behavior is gonna be outed because of them being more visible, seen in the office. I don't know what that
Mm.
trigger was, but I just have a feeling we're gonna see this more and more. That's my hunch.
Yeah, and I wonder if actually it could also be a little bit generational. Like, is it more accepting to the older generations for inter-office relationships versus the younger generations coming through that might feel quite differently about that in terms of fairness and other things. I just think back
It's
to
been a
what was
long time since Mad Men, Jenny. Like,
well, this
I
is where
think
I was going. I was like, there's a generation of people that find some behaviors and things still quite acceptable that are not today. So in lots of different ways. So I just wonder if that's playing a role. Well, watch this space. We might be doing a regular section on CEOs having
let's
affairs.
do it. Let's do it. All right, let's move along next to Korn Ferry's latest global survey of more than 15,000 workers reports a sharp power shift at work, flatter org charts, tighter return to office rules, and a widening reality gap between leaders and employees. In the US, 64% of employees say they're required to be on site full time, yet 7 out of 10 would prefer at least some remote work, and only 32% report access to hybrid options. Globally, 59% are in the office full time, but just 19% want that arrangement. Nearly half say hybrid would be ideal, and 27% actually have it. Middle management has also thinned out. 44% of US employees say manager layers have been cut. 40% feel directionless, and 72% of senior execs report being stretched versus just 47% globally. Separate Korn Ferry reporting notes that some firms now expect VPs to manage somewhere around 15 direct reports and senior leaders 20 or more, and that is up around 5 people each on average 2 years ago. Money anxiety tops the list. 72% of US workers worry the cost of living is outpacing pay, even as two-thirds say their compensation is fair or better. Generational friction shows up too. 75% of Gen Z report challenges working across age groups, while 45% of boomers see no issue. On AI, attitudes also diverge. In the US, 61% feel optimistic about AI's impact. Globally, 48% fear their job could be replaced within 3 years. 70% of leaders say their company has an AI strategy, but only 39% of employees agree. Jenny, I just threw an insane amount of data points at you right there. As I was reading through those, what's the headline for you in this report? Like, what stood out?
So the bit that stands out for me is this middle management thinning out piece, and the fact that people are now being expected to manage 15 direct reports and senior leaders sometimes 20. What stands out for me in this, in the report, which we didn't necessarily mention in the stats, is the correlation that's sort of trying to be made a bit between managers thinning out and employees understanding the strategic direction of the organization, and that without a manager, you then don't necessarily know that, so you're feeling a bit lost and you don't know where you're going. I don't think that's true, because I think that's actually a byproduct of poor leadership at a senior level and a lack of strategy at the top. But I come back to the conversation we had last week about the stats in the culture shock book that I was sharing, and the importance of managers from an employee engagement perspective, and just the long-term impacts of this that's going to be felt, because I feel like it's a very short-term solution to a cost problem, but will have significant long-term damage to the organization's health. And I don't think that long-term planning is happening. So that's what I feel looking at that. The stuff about people coming back to the office and hybrid, there's no huge surprises there. I think that pretty much tracks with what we already know. And I think there's also interesting on this AI, no, not the AI piece, sorry, it was the generational friction in terms of the Gen Z saying they have challenges working across age groups, whereas nearly half of boomers don't see an issue. I think that is that's quite staggering in terms of that perception of no, everything's fine versus no, it's not, and how that's balancing out and what that really means. What does that mean? What's that tussle? Is that a real sense of senior boomers and junior? Like, is it literally the hierarchy that we're not joining up
Mhm.
messaging? Like, what's really playing out there? I think is the bit I want to get underneath.
Yeah, I think the stat that stood out to me was the 40% feel directionless.
Mm.
That you've got nearly half of these people not really knowing where they're going, what's
But
happening.
is
Wh
that just because of managers, or is that because of a lack of strategic
I
direction
th
from the
I think
organization? That's the
without
bit I don't know.
I think without managers, I think when I'm just putting when I've worked with strong managers, I've felt that direction. When you haven't worked with strong managers or there's a big gap there, yeah, you're not probably really quite sure. I think going back to the return to office, which is always our favorite topic to talk about. I think that the fact that only 19% of employees wanna be in the office 5 days a week.
Yeah.
19%. So 1 out of 5 wanna be in there 5 days a week. Maybe not even for the best reasons possible, but
Mhm.
that's where they wanna be. 4 out of 5 are like, "No, please don't make us do this," yet that seems to be the trend that we have going on. I think the generational stuff is largely explained, I think, probably by the hierarchies,
Mm.
where typically, stereotypically, I should say, anybody that's in that boomer generation is gonna be senior leader or above, perhaps close to retirement, lucky them. They're not that they don't care, but they're in charge. Like, that's your problem to figure out. I'm not here to figure out the friction thing. We all have been that young employee coming into work
Yeah.
and have struggled trying to find your place. So I think that just keeps coming out. It's not generations, it's the
Mhm.
age um, showing up again. So yeah, there's a ton of data in here. It's good to look at, and there's some U.S. versus global discrepancies as
Mm.
well that I think are worth investigating. But to
Mm.
sum it up, I think the fact that we now see managers and senior leaders having that many direct reports, you are not
Yeah.
going to be effective. You're just not.
No, no, and I think and that's what I mean about the long term. I don't think you're gonna see this straight away, but I think, it's gonna be really interesting, and which is a sentence I never thought I'd say. It's going to be really interesting to see the engagement data in a few years, linked to this manager piece and see what that impact is.
I'm going to move along now to The Economist. They examined whether office mandates actually strengthen culture, drawing on a joint analysis with Culture X that maps culture signals across roughly 900 large firms using millions of employee reviews. The upshot here is that culture isn't one thing, we know that, and the impact of where people work depends on which dimensions you optimize: agility, collaboration, supportiveness, transparency, leadership quality, work life balance. They're saying location is a lever, not a cure all. The piece notes prior evidence that all remote periods increased organizational siloing, for instance, the study of 61,000 Microsoft employees during early 2020, yet it also flags trade offs since stricter attendance may boost some outcomes while eroding others and that employees value. The punchline is to decide what culture you want, then design work patterns, rituals, and manager practices to match it. Jenny, if culture is a portfolio of traits out there rather than one single thing, which one or two of those traits do you think should leaders prioritize now? Is it quality, transparency, supportiveness, collaboration? And how would you shape hybrid office norms to measurably move those?
It's such a good question because if I think about the clients I'm working with at the moment, all of those things are what they're trying to do. Like, not all together in one place, but I mean, they're all up there. I think that's I think culture is a lot more complex than I think people have given it credit for, and I think the office work from home debate has really shone a light on that in terms of it's not being all together. I think there are elements of being together, but that's the hybrid winning. I think which one or two of these leaders should prioritize right now for me and the work that I do would be supportiveness and transparency.
Yeah.
Because I think the leadership quality would be a byproduct of that. But I was having a conversation with a director earlier today where there's a lot of organizational change going on. And we were discussing how to kind of communicate through that when there's lots of things unknown, even for him as a director. And I just said to him, look, all you've got now is supportiveness, transparency. Like you can't lean on some of the other stuff because you don't know that at the moment. You can't talk about collaboration because what are we collaborating for? What's the end goal? Like you've got to go where the biggest benefit is going to be. And the one thing I care about with organizations going through change is that employees feel supported, listened to, heard, have a voice, that there is that dialogue. And I think there's just so much change that for me, it would be supportiveness and transparency.
Yeah, what was interesting in looking at digging into the data and the analysis that they pulled out was that basically it said that people that are in the full-time office, like you're there 5 days a week, that increases the speed at which you operate. So I think there again, if leaders came out and said, we've got to speed things up. Things
Yeah.
are moving too slowly. We know that coming back in the office speeds things up. We know that comes at a cost. We know you might not feel like you have as much balance or support out there, but right now speed is what we need.
Yeah.
Whereas flexibility helps with the experience, but then you have to come up with another way to speed things up. So I wish leaders would
Yes.
just communicate things in this way of saying, here's why we are doing it, not because
Yes.
we have a big lease
Yeah.
out there and we think it's going to enhance productivity. And if they said, hey, we got to move faster, we got to have you all in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I may not
it,
like it, but at least I understand it.
And if the big lease is the driver for the conversation about the culture, I'm okay with that. But have that conversation about, look, we've got a big lease. We need to use the office, but what benefit is that going to give us? What else is going on? What can we use it for in a different way? Like you could turn it into an entirely different functional space if you wanted to, that employees could use. So but it's having that sort of big, broad conversation about it. But you're spot on about that need for it to be that end goal. And this is another conversation I had this week is you've not started with the end in mind. So you're sort of communicating as you're going, but you're not communicating where you're trying to get to. And even if that isn't completely clear, then there's some insight there that you should be able to share. And I was bringing this back to a video that I saw this week, which was the CEO of Kraft Heinz or Heinz Kraft talking about the split of that company and what's going to happen. And it's very clear where they're going, but it's not for like 18 months. And I was like, this is a really good example of like showing that where we're going and then letting people work through that. And I think with the return to office, it's been so knee-jerk and so not thought through that they haven't had those conversations about looking at that data, and we want to be more speedy or we want to do this. And it's such a miss in the engagement side.
I don't buy the lease argument. That to me is like the sunk cost fallacy coming into play. Like you've already committed to it. And now you're just doubling down on it because
Yeah.
you made the investment. It's like buying a car that you don't drive. Well, I better drive it because I
Yeah.
bought it. Well, if you don't need to go anywhere, then don't drive it. So
But you could make
I'm
it something else. You could turn it into a massive gym or a creche, or like you could do anything with that office. It doesn't need to be an office. Like if you
right.
thought differently about that, you've made that investment. How do I do something with that investment? I think it's that thinking that just isn't always there.
All right, let's move along now to Forrester consulting study that was commissioned by Spring Health surveyed 1,000 employees across the US, Latin America, and Europe. It finds rising strain and underused support. 44% of employees report being more stressed than 5 years ago. And those top stressors are financial, workload, and work-life balance. Engagement lags. Only 55% say they're very or extremely likely to use available benefits that are provided to them, and 74% feel only moderately supported at best. Cost is a key barrier here, with 54% saying that alongside confusion about how to access care and doubts about effectiveness. Legacy EAPs and employee assistance programs are also slipping. Employers expect reliance on traditional EAPs to fall from 45% to 38% over the next few years. And just 30% of employees consider EAPs an ideal model. Planned shifts include consolidating underperforming programs, expanding high acuity and preventative care, and investing in centralized, personalized experiences with outcomes. And also culture matters, where leadership has invested in a mental wellness culture. 2/3 of employees feel supported versus just half where it hasn't. And employers also plan to scale tech using things like digital AI agents, Gen AI triage, and digital therapeutics. Jenny, what is the manager's job here when it comes to mental health? Are you simply a compassionate witness? Are you a boundary holder for your employees? And how do we train or prepare managers for it without trying to turn them into therapists?
I think it's such a good question because this comes up so much around mental health in the workplace. And there are some, I have experience of working with clients where sometimes it's really, really open and there's lots of discussion about mental health and managers and everything else, and other places where it's really quite hidden. I think the thing for me, if you're looking at as your role as a manager, I would go and do a mental health first aid training. I think managers should do that anyway. I've done that. And I think it's very helpful to make sure that you know what to look for in a crisis, which is important because first aid is when there is some sort of crisis. It's helpful because then you can know what to do if your team are behaving in a way that isn't normal for them, and you know the frameworks and things to follow to support that. So that for me is what I think needs to happen. I also think there is a need to educate managers in the legality around mental health support in organizations. And I think that's going to be different in all different parts of the world. But I think not to pare it back to the bare legal bones, but there's a lot of challenge for managers dealing with people who struggle with their mental health, but also their performance isn't great. And how you balance that as a manager of trying to be supportive because of their mental health, but also the performances and how you get that balance right. And I think that's where we clench and retreat. And I think that's
Mhm.
where we need to be upskilled and developed and know exactly what the rules are around that. Because I think that balance is really important. So for me, it's a skills issue. I don't think you need to become a therapist at all, but I think you have to know your team and know what different looks like and know what you need to do from a legal perspective. And then you can choose what's appropriate for you in terms of your levels of compassion,
Mhm.
listening, all those kind of things.
I love that idea of kind of treating a mental health with like the first aid
Mm.
part of it, because there's some physical health first aid things that we all
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of know, like, oh, if someone's bleeding, put pressure on it. Like we've seen that play out. I think that we oftentimes don't know what, because it's not the whole aid, it's not the
No.
whole treatment. It's just that first step. It's that what can I do right now to help get this person to the next step or
Yeah.
carry through? And oh, by the way, we're also now giving them more people to manage in this.
Yes.
And oh, by the way, they also have a job to do. And oh, by the way, they also might be struggling too. And I think this is where I would love to see companies truly reevaluate what benefits mean and what does health benefits mean
Mm.
for their employees. And if EAP, those employee assistance programs that are out there, if there's a lot of money being spent
Yeah.
on those. And if no one likes them, and if no one is using them, and no one thinks they're helpful, as a company, you should question, okay, why are we still doing this time and time again? Is there a different way? Is there a better way to do this for employees? There has to be if
Hmm.
literally the data is saying no one's getting it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think there has to be that conversation, that discussion about whether or not that's fit for purpose. They feel really old fashioned to me. Like when I think about an EAP, I don't know if it's just over here, but I don't feel like they are the right solution for organizations. They just feel very old fashioned, but maybe that's just my experience of them. Maybe they are
Although
much
I
better
was
now.
thinking about this, and maybe this is the wrong way to think about it, but I was thinking about like managers having a mental health conversation with employees. Parallel that to having a physical health conversation
Yeah.
with employees to say like, Jenny, I saw you going up the stairs. You were kind of huffing and puffing a little bit too much. Or, Jenny, I've noticed you've had McDonald's 5 days this week. Is everything okay? Like, shouldn't you think about eating healthier? Like, I'm wondering, like, those are weird. It's weird to
Yes.
think about it that way,
Yeah.
but how
Because
do
it's a bit
you?
judgy. That is a bit
It
like,
is.
and that's why you need to go through the training. in order to know how to deliver the first aid.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong with having McDonald's 5 days a week. I am a fan of McDonald's. I'm just saying having that conversation would be really awkward, but yet mental health, we're like, no, go have the conversations. You see well,
Yeah.
that might not be comfortable for that person
And I
either.
think, and that's why for me, the training is so important. I'll pop some links in the show notes to where I did my mental health first aid training, just in case it's helpful for anybody that might want
Mhm.
to do it, because it was just an online course and it was heavy, but it's proved to be incredibly helpful for me, for my friends, family, and people around me. So yeah, worth
Mhm.
doing.
Well, that's what I had for us this week, Jenny. Thanks again for that conversation, working through those. Let's get into our freakouts. Jenny, what are you freaking out about this week?
So I'm freaking out this week because on Wednesday, my book, Nobody Believes You, is up for an award. It's been shortlisted in the Business Book Awards for the leadership category. And I find out on Wednesday if I win. And I'm really excited and I'm really hopeful. But when you don't want to get too hopeful because you might not win. But I'm very excited to even be shortlisted is incredible. So I'm really chuffed for that. And I find out Wednesday evening in the UK whether or not it's a winner. So fingers crossed.
Yes, be cheering for you on that. I mean, I would think me having your book on my shelf behind me would be enough of an award, but I guess some people just need
I need all
more
the glory.
out
Need the
there.
glory.
Yeah. My freak out was something that almost snuck up on me, but I'm glad that it didn't, because I was so laser focused on putting on Flyover Festival, an ecology event that we did, that September 1, 2015 was the very first Ecology podcast episode. That's when it aired. And the guest was Mamie Piers, who at the time was the internal comms manager at Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. And I was thinking back then to not just the longevity of the 10 years, which I think is milestones, I think are always worth
Yeah,
celebrating.
totally.
And not just like the journey that ecology has been on in that time as well. But I was thinking back to as the technology that we use now to record this podcast and what I used in 2015, which shout out to GoToMeeting. I don't know if you all are still around, but I used GoToMeeting to record the podcast. I used iMovie to edit the audio because I didn't know how to do anything else. How I strung that together is still beyond me to make that happen. And here we are now 10 years later, entirely different world in so many different ways than 2015, but also very proud of what ecology has become in that time as well. So a very positive, again, coming back to the positivity here, Jenny,
Yeah.
just freaking out about that 10 years and the community and everything that we're doing there, and more excited about what is coming up in the next 10 years.
Yeah. And I would just want to say happy birthday for your 10 years, because I think that's important. And just as someone that's, we've known each other for that whole 10-year period, if not longer. And I think it's incredible to see that evolution of what it's become as it's bended and flexed with what the market needs at different times. And I think that's testament to you guys for not being scared to try stuff, see what can work, and not be scared to fail. And that's everything about it, really. I think when you're running something, I think it's incredible. And it's lovely to see it really flourish. I think this year, I feel like it's really coming into its own. So happy birthday.
Yeah. And I would say that's probably because for the first time in the 10 years, I can now give it its full due and attention
Yeah.
for it. So anyway, thank you all for joining us this week. All the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes. And please don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. I'm going to say that again. Please don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. We need those reviews. Subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone you think would enjoy listening or watching. You can also find us on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show. We will be back next week with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.